Welcome to Babblecom 5. This is episode 18 of season 4 of Babylon 5, Intersections in Real Time. The camera pulls in on Sheridan at floor level, and it's a hard grey floor with a drain cover in the middle of it. As we're reminded of Garibaldi's hand in his current situation, and Ivanova's warning to him, he is joined by a man dressed as darkly as his surroundings, who is equipped with Narn pain givers. Come within 3 feet, get hurt. 2 feet, get knocked unconscious. Guards have brought seating and a table. Compliance will be rewarded. Resistance will be unpleasant. Quick answers are expected. There's nothing personal going on from the interrogator's point of view. Sheridan is just a case file to him. The first lesson is that Sheridan doesn't know what time it is. He has no reliable point of reference. Makes sleeping difficult. Even harder when your interrogator shocks you for contradicting them, of course. He goes to pains to organise his desk and place food nearby, which he then proceeds to eat in front of Sheridan. Then he offers him the other half of his sandwich, suggesting it's lunchtime rather than morning. He frees Sheridan's hands. Sheridan says it must be lunchtime somewhere. He eats after reassurance that the interrogator is there to ensure his cooperation, which he can't do if he's dead. The point, of course, is that it can be lunchtime if they decide it's lunchtime inside these walls. The truth is malleable, fluid. So when Sheridan decides to think differently, the interrogator's job will be done. He says he's never been influenced by anyone, but the interrogator notes that he's changed his mind based on the information the military has given him. Orders become the truth. So he may not be political, but he is influenced by others. He finishes the sandwich with relish, but is then told that it's supper time, and that while the sandwich will not kill him, it is going to make him violently ill, where it won't affect the interrogator because he's used to the poisons being used. He'll return after they clean up the mess. So back comes the good cop, as Sheridan is still suffering from stomach cramps. He notes that their conversations are monitored periodically, and that as distasteful as he might find it, they are going to break him physically to get to his mind. He offers him a cup of water with salts to rehydrate, with which Sheridan is sensibly reluctant to accept. His interrogator suggests he's Sheridan's only ally. He asks him to confirm Ivanova's name as if they could have changed it since they broke away from Earth, presumably just to see if he'll cooperate. He doesn't. Then his father is mentioned, as being alive and well but incarcerated for as long as he is, so the sooner he cooperates the better for the both of them. We then discover that Sheridan has a confession waiting for his signature, part of the process from the interrogator's point of view, of course, which Sheridan objects to. Then comes something new. Adrazi is brought, shackled, into the room and proceeds to start confessing to being one of the aliens responsible for influencing Sheridan's behaviour, casually throwing in a mention of an Earth senator who has annoyed Clark recently. Waste not, want not. Sheridan knows that Adrazi is a strong, proud race and encourages him not to break on the inside, because as long as he doesn't, they can't win, and he only needs to say no to them one more time than they ask him to do something. And Adrazi does choose not to cooperate further, despite being afraid, and is then taken away to room 17. Shortly thereafter the lights dim, and there is a scream. His interrogator notes that Adrazi was expendable from the moment he arrived, just as he himself is. Sheridan, currently, is non-expendable, because they need a genuine confession that would hold up to a scan to try and encourage his fellows to change their minds. But he could become expendable if he doesn't cooperate. His interrogator leaves a loud repeating message playing when he leaves as Sheridan clasps his hands to his ears and doubles over. And now it becomes Sheridan's fault he's not leaving rather than his captor's. After all, he has to do is sign his name, say a few words, and he walks. At this point, even we don't know how much time has gone by. He's been put on intravenous nutrition and looks terrible. Sleep deprivation would clearly be part of their tactics. Freedom dangled like a carrot. But then Sheridan sees Delenn, silently standing next to his interrogator, and he simply says, no. At which point his interrogator says he wishes he hadn't said that, stands, packs, and leaves. He returns bringing the news that his superiors have now decided, as of this morning, that whilst a living Sheridan who could be paraded to the public would be preferable, a humbled hero, a fabricated video and forged signature would now be acceptable. So he asks him again, and again Sheridan says no, saying that if the truth is indeed mutable, then the system can be defeated by one person choosing no. So finally a stretcher is wheeled in, with this interrogator repeating the final chance offer he gave the Drazi, and ordering Sheridan taken to room 17 just as before. As he passes down a corridor with last rites, he sees Delenn framed in light at the door he is to pass through. A hooded figure waits in the room until the other guards leave, then also leaves. Then the guards return, place him back into a chair in the room where restraints hold him again, and the stretcher he was brought in on is turned into the same type of table that the interrogator was using before. A new interrogator then enters the room, asking the original health questions that we believe to be the first one did, with the executioner removing his hood to reveal himself as the Drazi from earlier. So the process seemingly begins again, or repeats again. Strangest thing about this episode is something that I didn't see happen. Maybe I'm transposing episodes, so I'll not mention it just now. What I think strikes me watching this again is that the manner in which it is shot is very different to the vast majority of episodes down on the ground, vertically above, and it's basically a single room with single corridor shot all the way through, with very little real colour. It's all very methodical, very practiced: sleep deprivation, physical deprivation, time deprivation. I have no idea how many days are supposed to have passed in real time during the episode. One thing I do know, and that is that Bruce Boxleitner's performance is incredibly strong as he grows increasingly haggard, and we start to wonder whether or not he might actually break, until he sees Delenn, of course. Then we know the interrogator is going to find out just how expendable he really is. Or that might just have been a fabrication, of course. Although it's not explicit, we can also assume that John is being drugged in some way, shape or form to try and make him more compliant, but this is where my headcanon thinks Lorien's energy might be helping him physically, if not mentally. Not something that can be discounted, I think. Did I find this as disturbing as I did first time round? I suppose not, because, as is often the way, it's the first impact that's the greatest with this sort of episode. It's the not knowing, the confusion that's part of what pulls you into this episode and puts you in John's shoes, because you have nowhere else left to go. Just consider, though, that this is literally the entire episode. JMS spends the entire time with the camera surgically attached to John's predicament. There are no jaunty interludes, no space battles. It's like someone throws on the emergency brake with just a few episodes of the entire season left and radically changes the whole tone of the year. That's an incredibly ballsy move. To the extent that many might watch this episode and turn around and say, that was a bloody waste of an episode. But as hard as it is to watch, if you've gotten this far, I defy you to not be sat in that room with John, hoping that he does find that inner strength to keep fighting for an entire episode. How do you feel about the interrogator? Well, he's methodical, apologetic, demanding. Not perhaps as physically full-on as the Volon's equivalent, who is indirectly referenced here, but of course the objectives are somewhat different here, although the punishment-reward directive is very similar, of course. It's interesting that they don't involve a member of Psi Corps, but perhaps even Clark only trusts them so far. Certainly a possibility. It's also ironic that Sheridan's status as a war hero that would have been a bonus to Clark at one point now means he can't simply kill Sheridan. He needs to show a broken, repentant hero to the people, because as we would recognise now with deep fakes, mere imagery won't convince people. He needs the physical object present, at least until his mythology has been subdued. Then he will be disposed of. Not much of an incentive for cooperation, but an attempt at honesty in a way. Oddly, I didn't remember him seeing Delenn. Maybe because I just found the whole thing so uncomfortable in the context of the first watch through. Medusa's going to be in bits watching this one. It'll be very interesting to hear her take on this when it comes through. The reappearance of the Drazi was a little predictable in the sense that there's no way you'd get a dimming of the lights from an electrocution in a modern facility, particularly not when a PPG shot would be just as effective. But of course, as the interrogator says, this is no military tribunal, no truth, no justice. It just is. Absolute control, absolute reality. Subjugation. Unless, of course, you have something worth living for, which John does have. So he gets through a first round, or what we assume to be the first round. How much more he can take remains to be seen. Join me for the next one.